So how does this, which is bigger than this, end up here without looking like this? Today for Tricky Thursday, we're gonna learn how to sew a set-in sleeve so it fits nicely, utilizing the extra ease that comes in a sleeve like this and making it easy for you. Hello and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new around here, my name is Trisha. I'm the owner of Creative Costume Academy, and we are all about sharing sewing and pattern making, specifically tips and tricks with you, especially on Tricky Thursday. Today for Tricky Thursday, we're going to talk about setting in a sleeve that has that extra ease in the cap. This comes up a lot with students of mine when they are doing this for the first time and they're not sure how to make a sleeve that is bigger, that has more space in the cap, like this example, than the armhole has. And a lot of times it's really hard to get it to be smooth and not end up with a bunch of wrinkles up here. Today I'm going to share with you my exact method and steps to how I set in a sleeve so that it's nice and smooth like this. Or here's another example with my coat. Notice that there are no gathers or puckers, but there is, I promise you, extra ease in this sleeve cap. Notice, same wool, it's my leftover. In this example, in my coat, I do have a shoulder pad and I have a sleeve header in here, so that does help with smoothing things out. And in the jacket that I'm wearing right now, which used to fit me a little bit better, but let's just focus on the sleeve, okay? Okay. I don't have a shoulder pad or a sleeve header, but you can still achieve that nice, smooth result. When you're adding sleeves to your garment, the first thing you want to do is you want to sew your body together first. So you want to have your shoulder seam sewn and your side seam sewn, or whatever seams, if you have princess seams, any of those seams sewn so that we have a complete armhole that we're working with. Second, you want to put your sleeve together. In this case, an underarm seam sleeve that has the single seam under the arm, but if you have a two-part sleeve, you want to sew both sides of that two-part sleeve together so that you have a sleeve shape like so. Next, I want to dive into where we're adding stitches and the sewing part, and I think it's going to be a lot easier for you to see if I go over to my table, so let's go. When you are working with the sleeve that needs to be eased into the cap, and just for a quick sleeve anatomy lesson, this is our sleeve cap, then you usually have a shoulder notch to indicate where the shoulder seam will go. You also have a single front notch, and usually you have two notches to indicate that is the back of the sleeve. Those single notch and the two double notches on the back would match to notches that should be on your body of your garment. Then the extra space that we're talking about that usually people struggle with if this is your first time setting in a sleeve is in this area. This shoulder notch is specifically right in the middle of where that extra space is. So if you were to walk, going back to the pattern, walk the pattern, you would have a little bit of extra space right in this area, and that shoulder notch should be right in the middle. We don't just want to keep that extra space in this area. That's how it results in gathering. So the first thing you're going to want to do is sew gathering stitches. So that's big basting stitches from your front notch to your back notch. So let's go ahead and do that. To be clear, what I mean by gathering stitches along the top of your sleeve is 2 rows of the longest stitch that you have on your machine. So a basting stitch, usually I put them about 1/8 of an inch apart, and I like to get them close to where my stitching line is going to be. I have a 1/2 inch on this pattern, so I have my first row of stitching at 3/8 and the second row of stitching at 1/4 inch. You want to make sure that wherever your gathering stitches are is inside on the seam allowance side of your stitching line so we don't see it when the sleeve is sewn up. The other thing is Once you start gathering this up, it's going to be really easy to lose your shoulder notch. So I went ahead and darkened it a little bit more with some orange chalk, and I may do it again. So, because you really want to know where that shoulder notch is. After you have your basting stitches, you want to go ahead and pull them up a little bit to give yourself a little bit of gathering up in that area. Just like so. You don't need to go crazy. We're not trying to get a poof sleeve. We do want this to fit into our armhole, but we want to start the process before we go back to the body of our garment. You just do that by picking one side. Usually the bobbin side will work a little bit easier, but if I grab both of those threads and I pull along, I should be able to gather it up. And there we go. So that gets us started. Once you have your gathering stitches kind of pulled together, we are going to pin the sleeve into our body. We're not going to sew it just yet, but we're going to act as if we are going to sew it. So I'm going to match in this case, for this pattern, my underarm seam with my side seam, and then my notches, front and back. Or if you don't have notches, in this case I forgot to add my notches, it should be smooth under the arm. We don't want any or need any extra ease under the arm area. After that underneath part is pinned, then I go up to my notch at the shoulder and I pin my shoulder notch. I'm not worried about what's happening up above the sides that right now. And little side note, it is easier to pin from the inside of the sleeve instead of on the body side. Okay, once I have that set, then I can take a look at my gathers. I actually didn't do too badly in this case. If you need more gathers, go ahead and pull your threads a bit more. If you need to release some of your gathers, you can loosen the gathers that you have. But use this time to kind of even out your gathers a bit. And once it matches, once your gathers fit nicely into that armhole in that section, here's a tip that I like to do. I like to take my gathering threads, all 4 of them, the 2 in the front and the 2 in the back, and tie a knot so that they're not going to loosen up or tighten up as I'm working with the sleeve. That side set, now I'm going to do the front. In this case, my front, I had pulled my gathers a little bit more than the body of my garment. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna release some of that and pull. If I just pull it out towards where the tails of my gathering stitches are, it will loosen up some of that gathering. And now that sits about right. So now that it's lined up, even though I haven't evened out my gathers just yet, I know that I don't want it to grow or get any smaller, so I'm going to tie my knot now. And here's another tip. If your knot keeps ending up way far away you want your knot to be pretty close to your sleeve. I do a little pin, just a regular old straight pin. And if you put it close to where you want the knot to go, inside the knot, it will make the knot tie in that area. Pro tip, pro tip. Okay, once you have your knot set and you know that you're not gonna shrink it down or grow it anymore in that area, notice I have like a bunch of gathers here and a bunch of gathers here. I'm gonna even that out in my armhole. That looks pretty even and good. Looks nice. Looks nice over here. Oh, we have a little bit. There we go. Now, here's the fun part. We are going to unpin this and go iron. That's the trick. So notice when I take the sleeve out of my body, you can see how it starts to put that curve up in the top of my sleeve. Let's go over to iron and make the magic happen. For this next step is really handy to have a pressing ham, and if you're not sure what that is, this is called a pressing ham. You can buy them at any fabric store. You can make them yourselves, and if you don't have one of these handy dandy hams, you can use a towel, but this definitely helps with this part. I'm going to take your sleeve cap and pin it to your pressing ham so that it looks like the shoulder is inside the sleeve, like so. And here's how I have mine pinned. You can see that I'm focusing just on that top part that I put those gathering stitches in, and I'm not too worried about what's happening below in the underside because that's just going to lay flat into my body. Once you have it set like this, you want to use your iron, and for this step, the more steam, the better. So if you can add some extra water, turn that steam way up, that's going to really help you. And you want to go around and steam out those wrinkles. And notice I'm going to do just this one side so you can see. So I just did this one side and put a lot of steam. You can already tell how flat this side is laying, and I still have quite a bit of gathering over on this side. This is why this step is so magical. I will admit to you that this is going to be easier if you are using a wool or a cotton or a silk, some form of natural fiber. If you're working with a polyester or anything that's synthetic, this will be harder. You're still able to do it, and it will still help you not get those gathers and puckers in your sleeve, but it will be a lot harder. The great thing about natural fibers, especially wool, since wools are made for making suits and whatnot, it really shrinks down with the steam. Notice you can't even tell that it was gathered, and that's what we want. We want a nice smooth sleeve head. There we go. Looks pretty good. Now we're ready to pin this back into our body and sew it up. But I want to show you what this looks like. We still have, remember how we saw that curve? Notice there's still that curve, and that extra room is still in there, except we've eliminated those extra gathers before we even get to the stitching, which makes the stitching a lot easier. Now I've got my sleeve pinned back into my body. Notice how there's almost no gathers right where I'm going to be stitching, which is what we want. Yay. We are still seeing a little bit of wavies and ripplies over here on the seam allowance side. That's why it's really helpful. The closer you can get to that stitching line without going into the body of your sleeve past that stitching line, the easier it's going to be to get rid of the wrinkles right at your stitch line. So let's go sew this sleeve in. I went back to a regular stitch to sew my sleeve in, and I forgot to mention, I wanted to let you know I am using white thread for this video just to make sure you can see the stitches that I'm talking about. If you are doing this on an actual garment, you would want to match your thread for the gathering stitches and of course sewing it together to the color of your garment, just in case so we don't see your stitches. Now let's see what this looks like on the dress form. And here we go. Doesn't Isabel's sleeve look beautiful? By the way, this is Isabel. Notice that we aren't seeing any gathering or puckering on the sleeve head because we took the time to steam all of that out before we added it to the body of the garment, which just is a little handy trick. Now, for reference, I forgot to mention earlier, this had about an inch of ease in the sleeve cap, meaning that this was an inch bigger in this area, but you wouldn't know by looking at it. So that is a way to set in your sleeve and not get puckers and wrinkles. If you'd like to see a video about adding in shoulder pads and doing a sleeve header, please leave me a comment below and I will get working on that and add it to my list. Also, I wanted to mention this cute little number that I'm wearing that I was showing you about my sleeve, which admittedly used to fit me better, is a free pattern that I offer. It was based off of a jacket that the marvelous Miss Maisel wore in court in season 1, I believe. So if you're interested in that, I'll put the link down there below. Thank you so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this video and learned a lot, please make sure to save this post so that you can come back to it the next time you're going to be adding sleeves into your garment. Please subscribe, turn on those notifications so that you know when we release our next videos. Here's a tip. It'll probably be next Thursday. Once a month, we also have a live pattern chat series between my channel and Charlotta of Charlotta Pattern Cutting School. And we're always doing some interesting, fun, and pattern making related things on there. So be sure to check that out the last Thursday of every month. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.